Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Shevchenko Scientific Society. Tonight we have presentation of the book about Ukrainian arts, edited by Svetlana Bedareva. And I invite the moderator, Vitaly Chernetsky, the president of Shevchenko Scientific Society, to speak.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this event. It's always great to be able to bring new, exciting work about Ukrainian culture. And it's great to have an opportunity also to bring scholars from outside the usual places who work on this very important topic. I am especially thrilled to introduce our speaker today and the book that we'll be talking about, because I had the honor to write the preface to it. So this is this book, Art in Ukraine Between Identity Construction and Anti-Colonial Resistance. It came out a few months ago from Routledge. And Dr. Svetlana Bedareva is, without exaggeration, one of the leading specialists on contemporary Ukrainian art. She received her doctorate from the Courtauld Art Institute in the United Kingdom. And for the past over 10 years now, she has been based in Mexico City in Mexico. So she also has been really instrumental in bringing awareness of Ukrainian art and culture to Mexico. She has, in fact, organized a major exhibition of contemporary art in Mexico City that was supposed to travel into many other places, but this was right before the start of the COVID pandemic. So from Mexico City traveled to Winnipeg, and it was in that context between Mexico and Canada that when we met the first time, if my memory serves me right, it was first on Zoom, and then it was really wonderful to meet then in real life and to find out how many interests we have in common, especially in trying to understand how the wonderful flourishing of innovative, reflective, critically aware art that Ukraine has been bringing to the world. What new lessons can we learn from it? How why it is so important for the world to listen to the voices of Ukrainian art and to be able to understand what is happening there. And Svetlana has been extraordinarily active as a scholar. She has had visiting positions at the Kennan Institute and the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., fellowship with CEC Arts Link, a wonderful organization that brings artists and art curators from Eastern Europe and the greater region to the United States for residencies. She has also had a visiting position at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And with all of these, she has been also very productive in her publications. Besides this book, she has edited 2 others. And her monograph that I just got as a present from the author today, so I'm really thrilled, a book that I've seen in manuscript, and I was really looking forward to its publication, Anti-Coloniality and War, the Ukrainian-Russian Case. Excuse me. This book is also a wonderful book of innovative theoretical look at what Russia's criminal war against Ukraine is telling us about the contemporary global situation and how art can help us understand it better. So, in other words, we have in front of us today one of the cutting-edge thinkers who is using Ukrainian art and her expert knowledge of contemporary Ukrainian art and its response to revolution, changes, and also the traumas and tragedies of the current war to bring better deeper, more informed understanding of Ukraine to the rest of the world. So please join me in welcoming Svetlana Bedreva to Shevchenko Scientific Society.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Vitaly, for first for inviting me here. It's really a pleasure to make this presentation today, and I'm really glad that there is such a wonderful space to talk about Ukrainian art. And thank you so much for contributing the preface to the book. And I think this was a very important text that helped conceptualize and helped further some kind of organize the thoughts around all the chapters, which are very diverse. And thank you so much for this collaboration. And I would like to start the presentation of the book with some kind of general information of how, which was first the motivation behind its creation. Of course, the idea of the book emerged in 2022 with all the events of the onset of the full-scale invasion of Russia against Ukraine and Ukrainian resistance that unfolded against these Russian aggressive attempts at Ukrainian territory, but also at Ukrainian culture. And largely this resistance undertook forms which were forms of artistic expression and forms of cultural resistance. In one of the first months of the full-scale invasion, I received a message from Ksenia Nuril, who is now collaborating here with MoMA Museum, and she asked me if I know where to publish a particular text about art that developed between the two revolutions, between the Orange Revolution of 2004 and Euromaidan of 2014, which always was some kind of an overlooked period in Ukrainian art practice, because it was some kind of this transformational moment that didn't produce large-scale art. Nevertheless, it produced very important socially and politically engaged art practices. And I was having in mind precisely the creation of the volume on wartime art and resistance. And then I realized that actually this is a very continuous, very durable process of transformation that we can link to both revolutions. And of course, we can link to a more larger theoretical framework, which is the framework of a shift between the post-colonial condition and decolonial situation that was brought about by the events of a Russian war against Ukraine and Ukrainian resistance. So that's how the volume on identity construction and ways we view and ways we interpret and ways we address identity or identities in Ukrainian society, and the particular expressions of anti-colonial resistance in art emerged. So I would like to thank to Professor Miroslava Mudrak, who provided this kind of endorsement for this volume. And she said in this text that one of the strengths of this volume is that it was written by a generation of contemporary Ukrainian art critics, art historians, curators, who are completely disentangled and detached from the Soviet legacies, and who therefore can offer fresh perspectives on the topic. I would like to say that beyond this kind of generational scope, which applies in part to the volume, but we have, when I will discuss the list of the authors and their contributions, beyond this generational scope that is not necessarily applicable, is rather a collaboration of people who have also diverse perspectives and multifaceted perspectives on the topic, but also have some kind of collective, how to say, agreement about how to speak and how to discuss particular processes in Ukrainian art, which are, of course, processes not only in Ukrainian art, but larger processes in Ukrainian society, because art is closely interlinked with society. It represents those processes that are ongoing in society. And from the other side, also artistic production affects to a certain extent how society reacts, and it affects this particular process. So this is this kind of double-sided connection. So the contents of the volume include the preface by Vitaly Chernetsky, the introduction in which I addressed particular post-colonial and decolonial aspects of the development of Ukrainian art practices following 2004, and 3 sections of texts, which are divided by subtopics, which is solidarity. Sorry, I don't see from here the titles of the texts. Solidarity, identity and decoloniality, and which each of them they present 2 or 4 texts that were written by the invited authors. So the first text is the text by Ksenia Nuril, who is director of programming of CMAP Global Arts Fellowship at MoMA Museum, and she wrote about antagonism and revolutionary aesthetics and in Ukrainian art between the 2 revolutions, the Orange Revolution and Euromaidan, and she addresses particularly the theories developed by political theorist Chantal Mouffe, and she speaks about how the revolutionary impulse shaped, first of all, solidarity, but also a diversity of artistic expression. The second text, The Mother of All Things, by Asya Bazdareva, independent art critic and art historian, discusses the notion of motherland and how this notion was deconstructed in the post-Soviet discourse, and how actually Ukrainian artists reflected these visions of first Soviet visions of this hierarchized notion of motherland as some kind of dominating entity to the contemporary Ukrainian interpretation of motherland. About this, I will talk later. I'm just kind of now that my aim is just to introduce briefly the topics. The third text by Jessica Zichovich who is the director of Fulbright Ukraine program. And she's an art historian working with topics of feminism in Ukrainian art. She speaks about the topic of self-determinance in female Ukrainian art, starting with avant-garde practices, particularly those female artists who participated in Mikhailo Boychuk's circle, but were long overlooked by art historians. And she links this artistic production from 1920s, 1930s to the contemporary works by Ukrainian contemporary women artists. The section Identity features a text by Alexandra Osachia, who is a curator of Museum of Kharkiv School of Photography. And She discusses there the emergence of post-Soviet visualities in photography and how they were interpreted through the lens of new notions, such as, for example, New East aesthetics, or how this visualities both opposed at certain point and confirmed their placement in this post-Soviet domain. The text by Alisa Loshkina, a prominent Ukrainian art historian, discusses another overlooked period in the development of Ukrainian art practices is the period between late 2000s and early 2010s, when major art institutions, both private and public art institutions, developed various projects of large-scale exhibitions. Many of them, they were, of course, linked to some kind of very centralized governmental initiatives. Others were linked to globalization of Ukrainian art production and Ukrainian art market. The text by Eva Sulik, a researcher at Free University Berlin, focuses on the important topic of corporeality and body-centered and gender-centered expressions in Ukrainian art after 2022, when the questions of human agency, questions of violence and resistance to violence, and the questions of actually the subjectivity of human body and also non-human bodies, because she discusses also the role of non-humans, of animals in the war, how they came at the center of attention, particularly after Ukrainian society and the world learned about the atrocities that Russian army committed in Ukraine in the spring of 2022. The text by Katerina Filuk, who was the curator at Pinchuk Art Center and who is now a researcher at the University of Palermo, focuses on the continuation of 3 generations of reportage photographers. And she focuses on the work of photographer who collaborated in the 1970s with the Izvestia newspaper, Irina Pap, and her depictions of documentary events that were kind of crossing the line with artistic practice. Then the school of Viktor Marushenko, who developed his famous series Chernobyl, for example, and further he established his own method of working with reality and working with the concept of truth. And this is something that Katerina Filuk is particularly interested in, how this concept of truth actually changed throughout these generational changes. And the student of Viktor Marushenko, Konstantin Polishuk, who is currently a soldier on the front line, who depicts surrounding landscapes and people around him, but who manages to keep to these restrictions imposed by his position as a soldier on the front line. So this is an important text that also traces this role of disruptions and but also continuity and legacy that links Soviet, early post-Soviet, and contemporary Ukrainian photography. In the section of decoloniality, there are 2 texts dedicated to landscape. Ilya Levchenko, a researcher from Kiev National University in the name of Taras Shevchenko, speaks about landscape as colonial tool and landscape as a decolonial tool, on examples taken from socialist realist landscapes and the ways how they were deconstructed and addressed in the works of Ukrainian artists of today. And particularly with a focus on wartime art produced after the onset of full-scale invasion. The text by Katerina Botanova, curator at Culture Escapes Basel, focuses on the notion of becoming local, notion of rootedness, as she refers to the text by Canadian researcher Adrian Evachev, who spoke about the concept of becoming tuteishi as something when as some kind of concept of both displacement and possibility of a new rootedness in a place to which one either doesn't belong or never considered that one belonged to this place. So she focuses on this belonging to the landscape that was fostered further by the occupation and the war. And finally, my text, Post-Colonial Past to Decolonial Future, Ukrainian Art in the Age of Revolution and War, focuses on the development of an application of the theory that I'm following in most of my texts, that is the reference to transformations that occurred in Ukrainian art after the dissolution of the Soviet Union with first anti-colonial stage, then the post-colonial conditions that came as a combination of different elements and reconsideration of history and revisions of traumatic narratives, contested memory, and so on. And then detachment and disentanglement from this post-colonial condition with the events of 2014, the necessity of documenting the war, in the necessity of producing new knowledge and new epistemologies that helped to turn away from the traumatic history of the past, rather looking into the traumatic present, but also the knowledge that this traumatic present produces. Okay, quite extensive introduction to the list of the text, but I hope that we will have time for examples, because I prepared examples for all the chapters, and I'm very happy to talk on behalf of all the authors. And I would like just to quote some of the statements by Vitaly Chernetsky from the preface, and I really like this phrase that it would not be an exaggeration to say that for many, the discovery of Ukraine as a nation with agency, strength, and skills came as an even greater shock than the brutality and the scale of Russia's invasion. And I think this is actually a key takeout from the entire book, but also not only this one individual book, but the entire development of text that is ongoing after 2022, when this notion of agency is taking a central spot, with this idea that actually, okay, in this resistance, there is a possibility of producing new epistemology and addressing and analyzing the ongoing processes around us. Is also it is also an opportunity for production of new knowledge and understanding one's own subjectivity in this world. Further, Vitaly mentions a very important notion of epistemic injustice that Ukraine suffered over decades, if not centuries, when many of aspects of the development of Ukrainian society were overlooked, but also the cultural production was in particularly marginalized. And this existence in blind spot leads to epistemic violence, when those who are marginalized and not noticed can easily be abused epistemically, but also in the most direct and aggressive way, as the Russian war against Ukraine has shown us. Yes, I would like to speak about and also Vitaly has mentioned precisely these aspects of the post-colonial and decolonial and change between the hybridity and ambivalence of the post-colonial condition and shift to the disentangled decolonial situation that began with first with Euromaidan of 2014, when this collective solidarity and emergence of participatory democracy actually brought to light this ongoing change, and then the onset of, or the beginning of Russian war against Ukraine with the occupation of the Luhansk and Donetsk regions and the occupation of Crimea. The research questions that this volume presented were, among others, how has the post-colonial condition been expressed in Ukrainian culture after 2004, and how has its transitoriness been gradually replaced by the colonial processes following 2014? How has participatory democracy manifested within the art projects realized during the two revolutions? What transformations of identity occurred in the years following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea? How does art contribute to the interpretation of and resistance to the ongoing destruction and violence? What is the timeline of changes in contemporary Ukrainian art in relation to the chronology of the country's social turmoil? Should we speak of identity beyond ethnic or political at all? Or should we develop a more nuanced understanding of the underlying causes of unity in the face of military aggression? And that was one of the key questions that I was asked about the title of the volume of identity construction. When we think about identity construction, first, is it constructed or it's somehow otherwise shaped? And second, do we speak about a single identity or a multiplicity of identities, or perhaps maybe it is better even to replace this notion of identity with some other notion that is more all-involving notion? And this is an open question that, of course, would be very difficult to reply in this volume that is dedicated solely to art. But I think this is an important question that will emerge and re-emerge in further texts made by colleagues and from different disciplines. So in my introduction, I outline the differences between anti-colonial, post-colonial, and decolonial. Starting with chronologically with the notion of colonialism, and post-colonial scholar Frantz Fanon wrote back in 1961 that colonialism fosters segregation, dividing the world and segregating territories into compartments. And this is something that we see in the effects of colonialism in all this kind of segregation and division that occurred in the late Soviet time, and that resulted in this regionalism of the times of Leonid Kuchma, and that was actually taken as granted by Russian attempts at occupation of Ukraine, but as it revealed, actually, these effects of segregation produced by the colonialism in the before 1991 were not as apparent as Russia considered, and this resulted, of course, in all this extensive resistance to Russian neocolonial war. Ukrainian scholar Marko Pavlyshin defined anti-colonialism as a mirror image of colonialism, which emerges in the time when colonialism is being disassembled, but in this opposition and in this attempt to resist to colonialism, anti-colonialism actually draws the sources from colonialism as a point of reference, because it is the only point of reference that it can address because of all the situation of persisting under colonial domination for decades or centuries. It borrows from its methods and worldviews, yet it thematically inspires and fuels the subsequent post-colonial transformation. So this was a text of Marco Pavlyushin that he wrote in 1992, and that was one of the first texts that actually addressed this post-colonial condition and framed Ukraine as at the center for study, focus for study of post-colonial theory. According to Pavlyushin, by the early 1990s, Ukrainian culture was already fully post-colonial in terms of its creativity, relativity, and pragmatism, developing a binary opposition with the preceding radical anti-colonial struggle. So post-colonial condition refers to the past, but not in the way that anti-colonial struggle refers to colonialism. It takes useful elements from colonialism. It takes elements from contested memory and traumas of the past, recombines it, and constructs something new on its basis. And this is the condition into Ukrainian society was immersed after 1991, and that began changing into something else in 2014 with the resistance of Euromaidan and with all this situation of with the necessity of resistance to the war. But of course, it was kind of a gradual process. We cannot draw such exact lines, but more or less, this is the chronology that I'm trying to establish. Tamara Gundarova proposes that, who introduced this notion of transit culture, precisely reflects on this notion of the post-colonial condition. When she says that transit culture is not only a post-colonial phenomenon, but also a result of the post-totalitarian cultural memory. It unfolds in a space where there is a sense of the presence of the past in the present, and there is also a threat that the future can be a repetition of the past. And this particular fear of presence of the past in the present, this is something that causes this necessity of returning, addressing, and permanent rethinking of the past. But she points out that this transitoriness has also to be transcended, and precisely this is something that began occurring in Ukrainian society in 2014. That the transitoriness of, and this in this reference to totalitarian cultural memory began being detached from the processes ongoing in Ukrainian society. So I propose that while the post-colonial condition denotes the situation immediately following the colonial experience and the decolonial struggle, taking on all the implications of colonialism to reinterpret them, the decolonial situation speaks about the final process of dismantling the colonial narrative and producing new knowledge, looking at the present and at the future. And this is something that contemporary Ukrainian art practices are exemplary of. That they look at the present and the history that is unfolding, that the history is persisting in the making in front of us as witnesses of this history. And it looks at the future as a future of regeneration. So the resistance to the war's divisive attempts has forged new collective solidarity and reunification while preserving diversity, which is expressed in social processes and art alike. Visual art practices look at the present as they mark the continuity of narrative, covering the disruptions and the body changes experienced by Ukrainian society in the last traumatic decade. Epistemic justice comes not only with a wide recognition of suffering, but also with bringing visibility to the value of what lies beyond the suffering: human dignity, individuality, and capacity to create and produce. Resisting Russia means not only opposing its neo-colonial attempts on Ukrainian territory, but also preserving, restoring, reconstructing, and expanding Ukrainian culture. The new language of speaking about Ukraine and its art, both locally and internationally, should not be the language of trauma, but the language of regeneration. And this is something that we tried to do in this particular volume. So I will start discussing the individual texts. The text by Ksenia Nuril focuses on art produced between 2004 and 2014. And among several great examples that she proposes, one is the work by Ksenia Hnilitska, The Life of the President from 2013, which represents the life of then President Viktor Yanukovych in this style of an Orthodox icon of this particular style of житие, which depicts a life of an Orthodox saint from his birth and to some particularly meaningful event in his life. And she depicts him all this kind of standpoint moments in his life of him being imprisoned and then him becoming a president and so on. Of course, this is a very ironic work that works on this kind of paradox. Also, it alludes to this precise colonial movement of the baptizing, of the celebration of the 1025 years of baptizing of Kievan Rus, when there was this delegation arriving from Russia in July of 2013 with all this Moscow Patriarchy and Yanukovych celebrating the baptizing of Rus. So this has also this particular connotation. And as in one of my lectures, it was previously one of representatives of the audiences, they noted, and I agree with that, that also it has some kind of social realist touch. Like it refers to this kind of official portraits from the Soviet epoch. And it's difficult to disagree with that. And this might be also kind of a tribute to the father of Ksenia Hnilitska, Alexander Hnilitsky, who was working in the late Soviet environment and precisely kind of incorporated also the elements of this ironic, to a certain extent, reinterpretation of socialist realism. So this is a work that kind of represents the spirit of that particular moment before Euromaidan. And another work by Anna Zvegentseva is a series of photographs called Event or Gap. And they present the events, side evidence of the violence that unfolded with these attempts of governmental suppression of protests. And each photograph is divided into two parts. One part, as we can see here, is the burned side of the building of trade unions in Kiev, which suffered during the governmental attacks in January 2014. And another side is another building of the main postal office that represents some kind of peaceful life. There is no visible damage. And this works, this series addresses this existence in between, the ambivalence of this particular existence between violence and peace, as if no social changes or social transformations are ongoing. And this precise work also has this reference that we can draw from the post-colonial theory of post-colonial ambivalence and existing in this hybrid state of being. The next chapter by Ася Bazdareva is dedicated to the notion of motherland. She discusses a work by Vlada Ralko, which is called Longing for a Motherland. The original title was in Russian, Тоска по родине. And according to Ася, this depiction of motherland is a depiction of this precise Soviet construct of a dominating entity that is highly hierarchized, that is highly oppressive, but that is being torn apart by some kind of new social movements and new social processes. And we see here this figure of two twins, possibly conjoined twins, that are tearing apart their mother's body with inner organs falling out, and she doesn't have a head. And in this, Bazdareva refers to the text of Olga Brukhowetska that defines revolution, the notion of revolution as both decapitated, as headless, collective movement, and decapitating as some kind of destructive movement. And she connects precisely this vision of the motherland to kind of to she connects this Relko's vision to the vision of motherland as kind of dismantling of this oppressive entity. Precisely dismantling of this all these post-totalitarian notions and some kind of exit to liberation and exit to freedom. The work by Katerina Lisovenko, which is a very famous painting that was created in 2 days before the onset of the full-scale invasion on February 2022. This work was untitled because the artist just painted it and it started circulating in social networks so fast that even the title didn't appear. And it represents precisely this decisiveness of resistance represented by a mother and a child, which simultaneously look like some kind of a reference to depiction also of Madonna with a child, depiction of liberty guiding the people by Jean Delacroix, the famous work about French Revolution. And also it has this connotation of motherland, the monument, the statue that is located in Kiev, where there is this warrior woman holding a sword. In Katerina Lisovenko's version, the child and the mother are showing a particular gesture that represents resistance, that might look also some kind of ironic gesture, but also what is important is that they have agency to protest, and she imbues them with this notion, with this idea of agency, of resisting, and agency of active resilience against any kind of attempts of Russia on Ukraine. So, and this is precisely this, as Bazdareva interprets it, as this depiction of some kind of liberated vision of the motherland through a collective vision. The text by Jessica Zychovich is centered on the work by Oksana Pavlenko, a representative of Mikhailo Boychuk's circle, and she is this is a work from the special fund of National Museum of Art of Ukraine, which was held in storage for many decades, and it was in very damaged condition, and as well as many of the works of followers of Mikhailo Boychuk circles. We know many of these works were destroyed, many of these works were lost, and those even that they were held in the special fund, they were heavily damaged with some canvases, even kind of rolled one over another without stretchers and so on. She speaks about the notion of self-determination as some kind of thread line that goes from the women of Ukrainian avant-garde to contemporary Ukrainian artists such as Oksana Brukhowetska or for example, Evgenia Belorusets, and the ways how this presence of women in Ukrainian art was fostered precisely through this idea of emergence of independent epistemology and independent thinking. And that's she marks it kind of a parallel between the women question and the Ukraine question as two parallel questions that could be resolved by similar means of giving agency and self-determination. The work works by Sasha Kurmas from the series or The Wasted Youth were discussed by Alexandra Asacha. And here we see a figure of a female figure, a nude female figure who is some kind of both as if protected and trapped between these monumental figures of soldiers from the times of the Second World War, and these soldiers, this complex of monumental sculptures, it finds itself right next to the monument of Motherland that I discussed previously. And this contrast between the living matter and this kind of very vulnerable human body and all this kind of monumental stone figures, they produce, they precisely pose this question of the totalitarian legacy and how it keeps being oppressing in the present, and how actually the human subject emerges among all these kind of oppressive notions. And the other work that she discusses is one of the photos from the series on Republic's monuments by Evgeny Nikiforov, is the dismantled statue of Friedrich Engels that was found in Poltava region. And following the acceptance of the laws on decolonization in 2015 by Ukrainian parliament, Nikiforov traveled across the territory of Ukraine, documenting how these laws on decolonization were implemented, either by private initiatives or by some kind of fostered by some kind of public impulse. How the sculptures were dismantled, defaced, converted into something else. And this project was having this kind of quite critical perspective on questioning what actually legacy and history are formed of. And this became one of the iconic work from this series. And curiously, after Nikiforov published the series, British artist Phil Collins, he arrived to Ukraine and he took this dismantled statue of Friedrich Engels. He brought it to Manchester. And it was mounted back, and now is still standing on pedestal in Manchester, because Manchester was one of these places where Engels actually spent his youth and where his some of his socialist views were formed, particularly. So Asacha addresses this deconstruction of post-Soviet visualities through the notions of orientalization, through the notions of particular notion of New East, and she discusses how this notion of New East in speaking about Eastern European and particularly Ukrainian photography, how relevant is it in reality to the to this particular framework? Like, are we detached from this post-Soviet space and post-Soviet visualities, or is there still this very strong connection? And she discusses it from two very kind of two sides. Sorry, I don't know what I did.
Go to slideshow.
Yeah, yeah, great. Okay. Okay, the text by Alisa Loshkina speaks about a variety of artistic exhibitions that took place in early 2000s to early 2010s, and she speaks about the formation of the first exhibitions of Pinchuk Art Center as large-scale exhibitions where projects by Ukrainian artists, typically of the generation of the late 80s, early 90s, were presented in the context of the work of international artists as kind of some first attempts of globalization of Ukrainian art practice. And she speaks about official initiatives such as the infamous exhibition of the Great and Grand at the Mistetsky Arsenal, which took place in 2013, precisely in parallel with this process of baptizing, of the celebration of the baptizing of Rus, and where historical artifacts from Ukrainian museums collections were shown alongside Ukrainian contemporary art. That exhibition was marked with a scandal that became quite famous, that the direction of Mistetsky Arsenal asked artist Volodymyr Kuznetsov to paint a mural dedicated to this kind of confluence of churches and of church and the official context and so on. The artist painted representatives of Moscow Patriarchy together with representatives of Ukrainian government in a hell, boiling in a pot of hell, and this work was censored by the director of Mistetsky Arsenal, and this provoked a huge public kind of polemics or discussion on precisely ways how government by Viktor Yanukovych applies this notion of censorship to cultural production. But Lushkina doesn't find only negative aspects about that period, because she proposes that the large-scale exhibitions at that time were possible because of course, because from one side the centralization of cultural production as one negative moment, and second as because of oligarchy as another negative moment. But those that helped invest into art practices and create exhibitions on the scale that was not conceivable already after Euromaidan, when the decentralization and brought kind of course, positive moments, but left artistic practice on level of kind of smaller scale initiatives. I will just talk quickly because, of course, we are running out of time. I don't want to talk too much. The works by Eva Sulik, so the text by Eva Sulik and the work that she discusses, they focus on female and the difference in addressing female and male bodies in wartime art after 2022. For example, she discusses the work by Lesia Homenko, a series which is called Max in the Army, dedicated to the husband of Lesia Homenko. They are large-scale paintings in the human scale that represent a transformation of her husband from a civilian into a soldier. The artist traces and depicts how the facial expression, the clothes, the posture of her husband in these portraits change as his social status changes. In the case of the work of Kinder Album, which is called The Burial, this work was created immediately in the aftermath of learning about Bucha massacre, and when all this kind of very traumatic images appeared in the media, and when when all the dramatic images appeared in the media, and there was this necessity of processing this information, and there was this something that Ukrainian society has never faced before in the observable past, and art became a useful lens of representing difficult topics of violence. And here we see three female figures of mourners, female mourners, which are nude and also kind of vulnerable and profoundly human, who are carrying this black bag representing precisely the victims of violence. And by this work, Eva discusses how all these difficult questions between the human agency and how the war deprives humans of their agency, the questions of subjectivity, and the questions of also particularly role of women in the war and their depictions, because they're not depicted as soldiers, but in many examples that she uses, it's rather very particular way of depicting that are related to such difficult topics as wartime rape, for example, and all this kind of atrocities. So, and also she briefly discusses the effects of the war on non-human bodies. The work by Katerina, the text by Katerina Filuk, as I already discussed a little bit before, speak about three photographers and their influence, intergenerational influence of Irina Pap, the reportage photographer from Izvestia newspaper, who developed a method that was departing from this kind of varnishing of reality and getting closer to the truth of life, but not in the context that socialist realism was demanding it, as viewing it as a truth of life as something very staged and something quite responsive to socialist ideals. Rather, she was she was focusing on some kind of more human aspects of reportage photography, and this was undoubtedly for Katerina Filuk an influence on the works of Viktor Marushenko, his Chernobyl series, his series on the Donbass, and his further development of his school, that where he passed his method on to his students. And one of his students, Konstantin Polishuk, here there is his work from the Night Watch series, where he couldn't take photographs of portraits of his colleagues on the front line. He couldn't take photographs of the landscapes around because of course, of the military restrictions imposed on this position being in the front line. But he was taking photos of starry skies, blurry silhouettes, and so on. And by this, given this kind of idealized but also very human approach to all this context that surrounds him as a soldier in this very uneasy situation, and this, replacing all this kind of threat and possibility of death on the front line with all this kind of wider horizon of what wider horizon enveloping the figure of the photographer. So just really short words, because I think I'm out of time, but the works of socialist realism such as Mykola Burachek's The Road to the Collective Farm, were deconstructed in several artistic projects, so one of which Ilya Levchenko discusses. Those are projects of Lada Nakonechna, who took elements of this linear perspective from the socialist realist works and deconstructed them into something else, some kind of isolated images. And by this, she opposed. No, she didn't oppose. In fact, she reflected this idea of recombination of the past in the post-colonial present, and I didn't show here the photo of this project of Lada Nakonechna, but she discusses it in the detail, and the images are in the book. And the third step of this were works by Katya Buchatska, where she addressed the landscape in the most direct way, making a series of works with the names like Hostomel Red, Mashunumbra, Chukrak Black, and many others, where she was taking samples of soil from particular landscapes that were either occupied by Russia or were under direct Russian aggression in spring of 2022. And she was mixing it with oil as a pigment, and also with wax, and creating paint from these samples of soil and painting this abstract works. And this is already kind of shows another level of detachment from this utopian and this very kind of restricted representativity proposed by realistic landscape, but gives a direct touch to the landscape that that is depicted not through visualizing it, but through directly embedding it into the pictorial plane of each painting. So the work by Katerina Olinik, everything is okay underground, as we can see, depicts also this idea of rootedness and in the past, and death and threat brought by the past. In some of the works from the same series, Katerina Olinik depicts also grenades from which plants are sprouting and growing. And Katerina Butanova discusses these works in detail when she speaks about the idea of becoming local, as being rooted and incorporated into the particular landscape, into the particular territory. She discusses also the works of Alevtina Kahidze from the Invasion series, particularly this series of 13 drawings, where the artist depicted herself first of all sitting in the cellar during in her house in the Kiev region when Russian tanks were rolling into Ukrainian territory from the side of Chernihiv region in spring of 2022. And the artist depicted her thinking about the ways of invasion and how they occur in vegetative realm and how they occur in human wars. And in human wars, of course, the invasions are much more aggressive than in vegetative realm, but also in vegetative realm, there is some kind of more stability in this invasive process. Katerina Butanova also addressed landscape, as we see, but from a very different conceptual angle than the text by Ilya Levchenko. And finally, my text also speaks about works of Alevtina Kahidze and how they developed between 2014 and 2024. And the change of perspective from reportage practice that was apparent in her in her project dedicated to her mom, Strawberry Andreevna, Lyudmila Andreevna, who was who lived in the Donbass region, in the occupied part, in the occupied part of the Donetsk region that was occupied by Russia in 2014, and could talk with her daughter only by phone for 5 years until her untimely death in one of the outposts between the occupied territory and Ukrainian territory. And with 2022, the full-scale invasion prompted Alevtina with her own reflections upon all this kind of violence that she witnessed. And this resulted in the film co-created with Peter Armenovsky called Invasions 1, 2, 3, which is a 360-degree film. It starts in the next to the grave of the mother of Alevtina Kahidze, and continues on where she shows the extent of destruction that was still visible at the time of filming in the Kiev region. And she talks with witnesses of this violence. And the particular element of this film is that the viewer is able to look at the results of these atrocities and destruction, or just to look away from them, because this is a 360-degree film, so it's possible to look at the sky, it's possible to look at the trees, it's possible to look at the buildings that were not touched by Russian shelling. But nevertheless, the focus anyway returns to the results of violence. Another project that I discuss is by Zhanna Kadyrova, and how her project Untitled, with the map of Ukraine, made of a burnt wool factory, factory wool, which is burned from one side and has the Soviet wallpaper underlining from the other side, how it changed between 2014 and 22. If in 2014 there was this map of Ukraine with Crimea fallen apart, in 22 the artist began adding actual rubble and pieces of shrapnel taken from the sites of Russian shelling to the installation, in order to highlight precisely this ready-made quality of violence, and how art actually merges with not only documentary look, but it merges with direct evidence from the side of all these events. This is something that I wanted to tell about the book. I hope it was not too long. And just 2 words about my new book. Precisely this conceptualization of all these notions of anti-colonial, post-colonial, and decolonial that I outlined in my introduction. I felt that there should be some wider space to speak about it, and this book about anti-coloniality and war is the first attempt to create some kind of methodology or theoretical framework that would describe particular case of Russian colonialism in Ukraine. So this is another book that was just recently published. So thank you very much. I hope we have some time for the questions.
Thank you so much, Svetlana, and thank you to our audience. And yes, we have a little bit of time for questions before I invite everyone upstairs for our refreshments. And yes, we have the first question. And just wait for the mic, please.
Hello. I just wondered what your own feelings are about the what I call the suppression of Russian language in Ukraine, or at least the dislike of Russian language as such, and if that is something that should be continued or should be maybe made less harsh?
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, it was not directly the subject of the book because we turned to some visual language of art, which is universal language. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, that the question of identity and identities and numerous identities is a very interesting and open question. And I think this is something that is applicable to Ukraine, and it encompasses various fields. Including that field that is the linguistic field. So I would say that well, first, I don't think that there is suppression of Russian language in Ukraine, and this was used, of course, as a pretext in the first turn to Russian occupation of Ukraine in 2014. But the main thing is that I do think that now Ukraine has entered into this process, which in my other book I call the process of internal hybridity, the kind of situation of internal hybridity as opposed to post-colonial hybridity. When there is this post-colonial hybridity, when one former colonial identity dominates over another. In this case, Ukraine has exited this post-colonial situation and entered into decolonial, when actually the production of knowledge from the former colonizer is not as important, because there is the inner exchange which is very vivid, which is very active, and there is this dynamics of collaboration between different agents. And for example, in this book, I am talking about different cultural institutions that are kind of public institutions, private institutions, grassroots initiatives, which use different perspectives, different languages in many senses, languages in many senses, and still persist in active collaboration because the situation demands this. So I guess this is my answer.
I will use my prerogative to Adrian. Oh, you'll be next, but I will ask a very quick question. And Svetlana, thank you so much. This is, again, something perhaps not directly addressed in the book, but this is something that I cannot help noticing, and that is, to me, is powerful and inspiring. All of us who have studied art history, whether directly or as yours truly as amateurs a little bit, know about Linda Nochlund's famous book on why there were no great women artists. And of course, she talks about the social conditions which made the possibility of greatness, that is social recognition and access to the conditions of participating in art production, not possible or restricted for women. I cannot help but admiring that I think the majority of the artists described in the book who are doing wonderful, innovative work, including Alevtina Kahidze, who I've also written about quite a bit, including Zhana Kaderova, who won the Taras Shevchenko Prize just earlier this month. So I would say that women artists are at the forefront of innovation in contemporary Ukrainian art. And this is a wonderful thing, but I was wondering, do you have a theory, perhaps accounting for this particularly remarkable explosion of diverse, rich, wonderful, inspiring creativity by women artists?
Thank you for your question, Vitaly. This is this is a question that I was thinking about a lot, because yes, I think there are several kind of social aspects or reasons for this. One is that, of course, Ukrainian women artists, they I think some kind of historically they since the beginning of the war they have larger possibility actually of accessing kind of resources, and they have possibility of dedicating time to this, and also they have of course this very profound necessity to speak about precisely along these lines of self-determination that Jessica Zehover speaks about, that making a parallel between the visibility of all this kind of omitted, marginalized discourses as Ukrainian Ukrainian discourses both locally, regionally, and internationally, and those roles of women in also in the Ukrainian society, and as seen from kind of a larger, maybe a larger perspective, as something that comes under a spotlight and brings them agency to speak about all the situations that is unfolding and the resistance to all this kind of situation that is unfolding. Yeah.
Thank you. Adrian, please go ahead.
So I'm the question about the Ukrainian cultural establishment that emerged from the emergence of the Ukrainian state, where a lot of people who kind of embodied patriotic sentiments basically dominated the official cultural landscape, the associations of artists, the award-giving entities, and so on and so forth. Where do you locate them? You know, they're national in content, but kind of post-Soviet in mentality. And to what extent does that conservative cultural establishment create some kind of an alter? Because everything seems, in your thesis, to revolve primarily around resistance to some external enemy or the legacy of an external rule. But there's also the internal dynamic. Is there some? Are you writing about those things? Are other people writing about those things? Because that seems to me also a fascinating topic.
Thank you for your question. I think that the collective solidarity in Ukraine that was expressed to a certain extent in the Orange Revolution, but it was kind of highly politicized back then. But also it was to a larger extent expressed in Euromaidan, and it was proceeding, of course, to a certain extent from this opposition to all these colonial influences, but also there was a certain very strong internal dynamics, as you mentioned. And in this dynamics, I think we cannot polarize anymore different cultural movements or different cultural trends that were at work starting from 1991 or from late Soviet period, precisely because late Soviet and early post-Soviet, they were very much marked by this anti-colonial expression and anti-colonial resistance, and they were polarized by default. And now, when there is this decolonial situation and there is orientation at production of new knowledge, there is the necessity kind of to incorporate different elements from very different fields. And that's when the internal collaboration between artists, interdisciplinary collaboration between artists, curators, researchers, but also some kind of wider collaboration between different points of view, between different worldviews, kind of cross-cultural exchange takes place. And I think this precisely this last 3 years are kind of exemplary in this dynamics. Yeah.
Other questions from the audience? Yes.
I have a question that's...
1 second for the mic.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bogdana Smirnova. I have a question that's not directly connected to your book, probably. But I think in the book you used a few examples of Ukrainian paintings where women are portrayed naked. So I think it's a very interesting phenomena in Ukrainian culture that while women maintain their agency and their subjectivity, they are still objectified in a certain way by women themselves too. So I was wondering if you have any opinion or theory about it.
So thank you for your question. This is precisely this paradox that Eva Sulek discusses in her chapter, that there is this very striking difference between the ways how men are depicted in Ukrainian contemporary practices, and the example of this series of works of Max in the Army, for example, that they are depicted as soldiers, and that women are largely the kind of largely depicted in this, as you mentioned, this kind of very objectifying way, and quite sexualized way often, and particularly when speaking about different Russian war crimes in Ukraine, such as rapes. Usually, those who are depicted are women, such as some series by Dana Kavilina, for example, which is called. Eva also uses this example it's called the series is called Blind Communications, Exit to the Blind Spot, about this kind of overlooked subject of women and their role in this kind of aggressive setting of the Russian war. I think that this question actually needs to be developed and conceptualized further, because this is really a very interesting question. But I think that this well, I wrote also a text by on this topic myself. And honestly, I still didn't find an answer about how kind of we can speak about agency, but also at the same time we refer to this kind of centuries-long convention of art history of depicting female nudity. So thank you for this question. I think it's something to be researched.
And if I can just jump in with a couple of words, and then yes, just as a remark, thank you, Bogdana. And Bogdana, of course, as a filmmaker, and this is what I'm going to say, that actually contemporary Ukrainian cinema has done a little better about showing women in the front line, women in the non-objectified ways. I mean, the Almanac, the anthology film about women in the army that I'm thinking that is certainly an example of that. So kudos to cinema for doing that. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I think this is a very fascinating question too. And I was going to remark about that chapter that you have on gender differences. And it seems like in that chapter, you have this sort of highlight of very old-fashioned, traditional, women have this objectified thing and men have their thing. I think we're way beyond that. And in this era with the arts and photography and the war more than anything else, you have this splintering of those images in so many different facets that are absolutely fascinating. You talk about women and war. Do you know there's this fascinating trend among women soldiers, women soldiers from 2014 who had to fight to get into the army. They weren't allowed. They were kicked out from the men's barracks. They were a lot of them had to service the commanders and be their girls for the nights and that. They had to fight against all of that. To emerge in the 2016, 17, 18 as world-class snipers, drone operators, artillery operators, I mean, all kinds of the most challenging male-dominated things that they were able. These women went on to post a nudie calendar, and they've been doing it every year, that I find totally fascinating. They are naked and sexy, and they do it for themselves. They do it for themselves. They're playing, they're ironic, they're doing all kind, they're just having fun. A lot of it sort of implies perhaps lesbian tendencies, but I don't need to label. It's women who can be more polymorphic and looser with their sexuality, I think always. And they can splinter in so many different. These women become girls, they become playful, they become sexual, and they say, don't pin us as masculine women now. Don't stereotype us anymore. We can do what we want. And there is agency in that. And it's just fascinating for me.
All right. If we don't have immediate questions, let's give our guest another round of applause. Thank you so much, everyone. Please stay tuned for the announcements about our other events. We have a very rich program, including as a secret, which I think I probably can reveal, we will have a conference in May in collaboration with the Ukrainian Museum. So art remains a very important aspect of our interest. And I invite everyone upstairs to our reception with some wine and some non-alcoholic drinks and a little bit of nibbles, so we can continue the conversation more informally upstairs. Thank you so much.